All right, so we're going to get started. Tonight's talk is about creativity and martial arts, which is why it's titled Creativity and Martial Arts. And this comes from the question of the week in the dojo, which is, do you allow yourself to be creative? And this is a great question to ask because, especially as adults, especially in quarantine, we have a tendency to just do the same things in the same places the same way every day. And that is what is driving so many people crazy right now. This country is crazy partly because you're all stuck inside, and you should be, but just because you're stuck inside doesn't mean that you have to do things the same way every single day. So I'm a huge fan. You've heard me talk about different, fun ways of finding ways to be creative. But this is going to ultimately be up to you, just finding ways that works, and finding projects to be creative with, or just saying like, you know what, today I'm just gonna draw something. I'm just gonna paint something, and this is maybe something you haven't done since you were a kid. Great. The more stuff that you do now that you haven't done since you were a kid, as long as it's not the stupid stuff that you know you're not supposed to do anymore, the better, right? And so we all have stupid stuff that we know we're not supposed to do, but creativity is like trial and error, and this is how martial arts should be. One of my favorite stories about doing stupid stuff that you're not supposed to do was I got a brand new pair of pants when I was in middle school. I was probably in 5th or 6th grade, and this was when baggy pants, not like these kung fu pants that are always going to be in style, but baggy corduroy pants were in style, and I got a brand new pair, and I was so happy with my sweet new cords, and I was going over to a friend's house to ride my bike, and my dad took one look at me and my pants, and he says, you're gonna get those pants torn up in your bike. And I was like, shut up, Dad. And I just took like 2 pedals. It was like pedal right, left, and the pants just got sucked right into the chain and just tore right down the pant leg. And that was the first time that I realized, there are people out there that know more about life than me, and I should listen to my parents. And that experience of ripping my pants in my bike chain is the thing that made me not do it again. My dad could have told me, probably till he was blue in the face, like he did on many things that I ignored him on. Could have told me that it was going to happen, but I wouldn't have actually gotten it until I did it. That's trial and error. And when you guys hear me tell you things like, I don't know, keep your hands up, it goes in one ear and out the other until you go to spar with somebody, they punch you in the nose, and you go, ooh, I better keep my hands up. I wish somebody had been telling me this the whole time. This is a very simple example of the way that martial arts works and the way that we learn it. It's a process, it's a method, and it has been around for many, many years. This way of perfecting things has been around since far before martial arts has, but martial arts does a really great job of it, where you try something and it works, so you keep doing it until it just keeps working forever, or until it stops working, and then you adjust, and then you do it differently. And this is how class goes, right? You come into class, and some people in their first class are very creative, and they're doing all kinds of stuff that I'm not teaching them. But people will oftentimes come into class, and it's very overwhelming in the beginning. You're learning all of these details, but within the first couple of weeks or months, you start to get all right, I can actually throw a couple of these techniques that he's talking about. He says front punch, and I know front punch. I can do that. So think of this as like learning words. And when you learn words, you're learning how to spell them. There is a correct way to spell them, and then there are lots of incorrect ways of spelling them. And if you spell the word incorrectly, it doesn't make sense to you or to anybody else. But you've got a word, and this is like my hook punch. This is the word, and it's one of my favorite words, and I use it all the time. And then I've got other words that I don't use as much, like knife hand downward delivery. But I still know it, and I still use it. When you are practicing martial arts, you're going to start to have like an individual expression. Your artistic expression comes out in the way that you put these words together. So you got to be speaking the same language, right? If you're not doing martial arts techniques and instead you're painting a picture, that's a different language, and you can certainly be creative when you're doing that other thing. But if we're trying to do martial arts, then you're doing martial arts techniques. But the way that we put them together, and the way that we try stuff that will work and we use it, or will not work and we stop using it, this is the incredibly useful process that we learn, and then we can apply this to other things in life. So when you go to spar, for example, or you go to grapple, and you're like, you know what? I've been working on this thing, I'm going to try it. You know that your technique works pretty quickly. And you'll know when it doesn't work because you get that instant feedback of some kind of physical pain, whether it's a tap or you get hit or whatever it is. You're not going to get that instant feedback so much when you're trying to put together combinations outside of sparring or free grappling, because it's just you like moving through the air. So you're relying on a more subtle kind of reinforcement, which is the way that it feels when you're moving your body. And there are ways that feel right, and there are ways that don't feel right. When you are really getting into that flow state, this is really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about creativity. It is not, and I'm not saying that this is a wrong definition of creativity. I'm saying that the way that I'm talking about it tonight is not that you think hard with your brain and plan. And there's a great saying in martial arts or boxing, I forget who says it, but all your best plans go right out the window as soon as somebody punches you in the face. So you've got to be able to adapt. And when something is flowing through you in sparring, or just as you're repping combinations on your own, then you get that much more subtle reinforcement of everything in my body and in my mind is just clicking. So this is what many people call the flow state, what I like to call mushin, which is no mind. And no mind means just that. Your mind is not there in charge. You are mindful, you are totally aware, you are totally present in the moment without getting in the way of it. And when you are in that state, then creativity spontaneously happens. It's not something that you spent a lot of time thinking about, but it is something that you spent a lot of time preparing for. So whenever you come to class and you rep technique, that's you preparing to allow yourself to do this, to allow the technique to flow through you freely. And if you try to skip that and you just say, I'm going to be creative, like one of my earlier Tai Chi students who came in, and I asked him if he did Tai Chi, and he said, yeah, I just kind of move around. That's not Tai Chi, that's just kind of moving around. But if you learn the actual postures and you know how to do them correctly, then when you step back with your conscious mind, it happens. And it happens through you. It's like when Bruce Lee said, it happens. And Ueshiba Sensei said, spirit flows through you. So this is not a function of the conscious mind. This is not a function of the ego or the small self. This is something that is a function of something bigger than us. So I had 5 minutes before class, and I pulled up some great quotes. One of them is by Naval Ravikant, who I'm not sure if I'm saying that name correctly, but he's a famous investor, I guess. And he said, creativity is obscured. I can't even say that word correctly. I'm making up my own words now. Creativity is obscured by the conscious mind. And this is basically like what I'm saying. When you're consciously there too much, you get attached to things. When your mind is attached, it cannot create because it's stuck. And this is what our ego mind and the conscious mind loves to do. It loves to be stuck on things. So when we are truly able to let go, then things can flow. And you'll notice that if you're trying to be very fluid with your movement, but you get stuck on something, that's something that you're attached to. And your physical body will get physically attached. You know, you're grappling with somebody and you want to flow, but you kind of freeze and tense up. And that comes usually from a state of mind that is fear. So there's another quote, and I forget who said this because I didn't write this one down, but it said intelligence is present when there is no fear, or something like that. And I'll replace the word intelligence with creativity, but it's just a different kind of intelligence. If you are afraid, then your mind and your body do dumb stuff. And you might feel safe enough in grappling to not just, completely stand up and run away, but not comfortable enough to stop yourself from freezing up and tensing up. That is a function of the mind being attached, and it's attached to whatever it is attached to. It's attached to keeping this position. I know I'm not in a great position, but I just don't want to get in a worse position, so I'm just going to tense up right here. It's attached to what you know. And this is a very difficult thing to get beyond, because what we know is safe, and what we don't know is not safe. And all animals, and human beings, I would say especially, are so attached to what is safe, and that really obscures our ability to be creative, because creativity is not safe. Creativity requires vulnerability. This is another one of the quotes that I got. This one's from Brené Brown. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. You can't feel safe, because if you feel totally safe, then that's not necessarily true. You have to feel safe being unsafe. That's what I mean. So when you are being safe, you can't be creative. It is very difficult to be creative if you don't feel safe, though. So you want to kind of get comfortable in that space where things are unknown, and be willing to make mistakes. And this is what we do in the dojo: is you make mistakes, and this is a safe place to make mistakes. Why? Because everybody else is making mistakes all the time. That's what the dojo is. It's a place where you come in and you mess up. And it's not you, it's everybody. We're learning. And I mess up sometimes, the senior students mess up sometimes, you mess up all the time. It's great. That's the way that it should be. And when you come to expect that, your expectation is that of, I'm going to mess up, and it's great, it's perfect, then that is what you allow yourself to do, and creativity then can happen. If you are attached to doing things that you know are safe, then you're going to keep doing the same techniques over and over again. It's something that I keep reminding people in combinations when we're doing these classes on Zoom, and I give you guys the freedom of coming up with your own combinations. I see the same stuff over and over again. It's like I'm looking at Tanya, and I can pick on her because she's usually pretty good at being creative, but it's like I'm looking at her and she's just throwing like the same hook punch, the same knee kick, the same roundhouse kick over and over again. I say those because those are the techniques that I do all the time. But if you realize where that comes from and why you're doing it, and then you realize what's possible when you set that aside. If I'm doing a lot of hook punches and knee kicks and roundhouse kicks, that's great for those techniques, but there are 35 basic strikes that we do, and you're doing 3 of them. That means that there are 32 that you're just not doing. That's what's there available for you when you're not attached. And this is really the way that it works with the rest of life. When we are attached to something, we are keeping ourselves small, we're limiting our options, and there is so much in life that we are missing out on. And it might be things that other people have already done and created, and we can just take advantage of them, like all of the techniques that you guys have done. It might be combinations or things that you're kind of coming up with. It might be something that nobody's ever conceived of. And the greatest things that will ever come from any of us, as far as like our contributions to humanity. And this is not necessarily fair, because there are lots of contributions that you guys make, right? You're making a contribution as a mother, you're making a contribution as an artist, as you are, Kai, and all of the things that we do. But I would say the biggest potential, at least, for contribution, or the biggest potential contribution, is one that nobody has thought of before. And this might mean that you're being creative in whatever it is that you're doing in life, but it could be, somebody out there that's going to invent the next thing that changes the world, or, a vaccine for the coronavirus, is not necessarily somebody that's doing the same thing that everyone else before them has done. So I talk about what it is to be a great student. It is to use your teacher as a stepping stone. And this is a quote from Kodo, from Furuya Sensei. This is the greatest thing that a teacher can aspire to, is that you guys get to where I am, and then you step on me and then get better than me. And this is the greatest thing that we should aspire to as human beings and as a society and as parents and whatever, is that those who come after us will use us as stepping stones and become something greater. If you just get right up to where everyone else already is, then you're stuck under that ceiling. This is like the idea of Khalil Gibran talks about being a great parent is just you pull back the bowstring and just point it in a direction and you loose it, and that arrow flying through the air is your child, and you give them the best possible shot, and then they go, and you let them do their thing. And if you're there just like tapping the arrow, like, go this way a little bit, go that way a little bit, it's going to fall down and crash and burn, and that's it. This ability to be unattached to and kind of let things happen is very difficult for us. There's another great quote from Maya Angelou. She says, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. I think creativity is something that we need to practice. And we practice it in the dojo, and we should practice it in life. And the more we get used to being creative, and the more we get used to being vulnerable, the more easily we'll kind of slip into that state. And then that's when magic happens. That's when things that are beyond our comprehension will come through us. And we want to be like that channel. And when we practice being a channel that things flow through, then it just, eventually it just becomes the natural way that we are. So in martial arts, there is, a specific kind of methodology that we use for this. You learn the basics, you become a technician. And again, you can't skip that first very important phase. You practice so perfectly, making your technique exactly the way that you've seen it, that you cannot do it incorrectly. And you don't have the technique up here. You have it in your bones. And there is no shortcut to this. You must just do it. Repetition over and over and over again. Hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands of times over years. And once your technique is at that point, you are a brilliant technician, then you can look at becoming an artist. Now, this first stage in martial arts is quite long for the vast majority of us. It is years. It might be decades. And there are other things that you might find in your creative endeavors that are maybe even more time intensive than that. Unlikely, but possible. But there are many of things that you'll find that have maybe a shorter first stage like that, but you still have to learn how to hold a paintbrush. You still have to learn how to point the camera in the correct place, and how to click and develop the film and all that stuff. Tanya's taking a photography class right now, and she comes in and she messes around with it, and then takes it and shows her teacher, and her teacher's like, "This is crap. Go back and do it again." And this is great. This is how you get the technique. And I think I have a tendency to be a little bit too nice to people for the first while, and then when I start yelling at you and I'm yelling at you to fix your technique, that's when you know that you've been here long enough for me to feel comfortable to really give it to you. That's what you want to seek out, is that, like, okay, this is what I need to fix. This is what's the worst right now. And when you are in that process, it's going to seem very much like you're turning yourself into a cookie-cutter exact replica of everybody else. And while I would love for your technique to look exactly like mine, the truth is I don't actually want it to be like that in the long term. I want your technique to get better than mine. But I'll take it. In the short term, it would be great. Like if I could just wave a magic wand and all your technique looks like you've been practicing for 20 years, I would have so many students and be incredibly rich. But that's not happening. So what is happening is what we've got. You show up and you do the work. And it seems like you're turning yourself into a cookie-cutter exact replica. But in making yourself a perfect technician, you are actually learning your version of that technique, which is going to be at least somewhat different. And at some point in this process, you will start to spontaneously create combinations, spontaneously create with the movements of your body that fit into the principles and really work and really make sense. Again, you're not reinventing the wheel from scratch. You're finding a new way to use it. That's when you become an artist, and it can't be something that you force. This is not a process of you thinking really hard and trying really hard. In fact, the harder you try, the worse you get at being creative. The less likely it is that something will spontaneously flow through you. But back to photography, there's a great study that I like to talk about from time to time, and I don't know who did this study, but Google it, it's a real deal thing. There was a photography class, and they took half the class and they said, we're going to grade you on the one best picture that you create, the single best one. You're only turning in one, and that's going to be your whole grade. And then they took the other half of the class and they said, we're grading you purely on quantity of pictures. You take as many as you can, and then you hand that in. So I don't know what it was. You do 1,000 pictures, and you're going to get an A. And they found that every single one of the best pictures was in the group of people that just took as many pictures as they possibly could. And they were practicing. That's the only way that they got better, is by practicing. And I'm sure that some of it was very formulaic in the beginning. They were thinking like, okay, well, I'm reading the textbook, and the textbook says, first I have to do this, and this is what my aperture should be set at, and this is how I do this. And there is still, through just the process of doing it so many times, you end up becoming yourself. Your real self beyond the ego. You end up being connected to your higher self, or your deeper self. And it is just trial and error. And trial and error happens in the beginning as a very mental process, but then it becomes something deeper and beyond that. And then it begins to just flow through you. And look, I'm sure many artists who have practiced this will agree with me when I say sometimes what you create, even after you've gotten to the point where you're supposedly transcending technique, some of the stuff you create is crap. I do combinations sometimes, and I get hit in sparring, and I think, well, I'm not doing that again. But that is part of the learning process. If you never get hit, you never get the opportunity to rise above it and transcend it. So all of these students that were just taking as many pictures as they possibly could ended up being more of an artist than those who were just really stuck in their head and thinking about how do I do this the best and just trying to set it up and making it perfectly through all of that experimentation. And then at some point, and it might just be like in a blip, just for a split second, something is created. And something truly unique and something that is spontaneous and flows through you cannot come from the ego. It cannot come from the logical mind. It's something that part of you prepares you for, but then you have to let go of it. It's like one of my old Tai Chi students said, learning Tai Chi is like having a cat. When, the more you go after the cat and try to pet it and love it, the more the cat just runs away and is not interested in you at all. And it's like that scene in Tommy Boy. If you guys haven't seen Tommy Boy, it's a new classic. It's like that sail is like a little bird, and I love it, and I pet it, and then I just crush it, and it dies. This is like Tai Chi, and this is like everything else. The harder that you hold on to it, the harder that you try, the less likely it is to actually happen for you. It's a cat. It's going to slink right away. So what do you got to do? You got to just be there and do your own thing, and then allow it to come to you. So this is what we should be able to do on some level in our meditation practice as well. If you sit there and you try your hardest to become enlightened, it will never happen. If you try really hard to focus on the breath, as soon as you lose the breath and you come back to it, great. But trying usually turns into attachment, because I'm trying to hold on to the breath, and then I lose the breath, and then I get angry at myself for it, and now I'm all up in my head in the cycle of thought of, why do I suck so much at meditation? And so you just let it go, and you just gently come back to the breath. And just as the breath will gently flow through you, as you are a channel for the breath, and you'll be a channel for consciousness and a channel for awareness. And that practice during meditation is what we want to be able to do in our physicality and practice with martial arts and in everything else that we do. And to truly be able to create something is to be out of that state where you make yourself wrong for messing up. You want to seek out those mistakes and revel in them and laugh at yourself when you make mistakes and enjoy it, because when you do that, then you allow yourself to do it more and more, and that's when you're snapping those pictures and you snap 100 or 1,000 that are garbage, but then eventually they all start getting really good. So when you sit to meditate tonight, let's really try really hard not to try. Effortless effort. Wu Wei. And when you recognize that you're not totally in the moment, you're not totally present, let that thought go. And just gently come back to it. Allow that consciousness, allow that breath to flow through. Sit comfortably.